one of the reasons I also chose this pot was because of the deer design. Um, One of the stories that was told to me is that my grandmother had actually asked one of the governors of Zuni Pueblo if she could use the deer design in her work. And so you'll find that in our family, that's one of our favorite designs to use, that deer design. It's not exactly the same as this particular design, but she had actually got permission to use it, so it's kind of like a family thing that we do. Um, Also, the lightning pattern design, my grandmother actually revived that from seeing a pot shard, and so she was very famous for reviving that design. Acoma is noted for its geometrics, and that's mainly what you'll find on the older pieces. A lot of the animal designs are were introduced. The parrots, the deer, a lot of the members' designs, the animals, the deer, the fish, um, mountain lions, all of those were introduced from the members' people into our work.
I did pottery when I was in college at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and then stopped and, got married, had kids, had the career, the job. And then when my daughters went off to college and moved out, I started thinking that I wanted to do something, for myself. So I got back into making pottery, and it's probably been about a good 12 years now. So I have that connection, and then I have some of their pieces in my collection at home at the Institute of American Indian Arts when we would get to go to other museums, and I was a museum major, and look into collections. There was a piece of pottery that was at the School of Advanced Research that I always went to, and I wrote about it. I even used some of their design work in some jewelry that I had made, and I kept going back to that pot. And I when you're going to those collections, you're drawn, to your pueblo, and you want to see, who else was making pottery. And there's a few prolific potters within Tesuque that you'll see in those collections, um, but there's not a lot. So it's very minimal. I think in any collection of Tesuque pottery in any museum, there's a few pieces. It's not like Santa Clara or San Ildefonso or some of the other pueblos where you see tons of work. So to really look at it and see it and know that this is came from my family or my community members is something that I really look at and cherish. And I'm glad that there are those pieces that I can look into, and I can go back and see their designs and try to incorporate some of that work into my own work.
I do find a lot of inspiration in the older pieces, but one of the things that I was taught was to make it your own. Don't copy exactly. There's you can, and I use the shapes and designs and the older pieces for inspiration, but again, changing them up and you making them my own designs. And then now, um, with the some of the pieces that I'm doing now, including polished, well, polychrome, and then maybe a polished red band, but also including um, materials such as uh, fine olive shell hishi, turquoise hishi, and also the addition of gold and silver leaf to my pieces, and so kind of combining a modern feel, but with the old techniques and the old materials. So bridging the years and bridging the ages and making it um, something of today.
And so I'll look at a pot that was made in the 1900s, and then I'll lock the design, and then I'll incorporate it in my work that's today. So it's my interpretation.
I like to use come from the ancestral villages of the eastern side of the Manzanos and the Socorro, but those are what influences me, and I'll see it, their designs, their shapes, and incorporate it into my style. So it's honoring them, but going into the future.
My ties go back also with Michael Cantina, him being Laguna Pueblo. We've done a lot of research and studying about Pueblo pottery, especially Laguna pottery. And that's something that, when we go to museums or private collections, we seek out the Laguna artists and we just really study the designs. And I think, through Michael, we've really developed a great connection with our pieces. We go further back even with our pre-Columbian pieces. We study a lot about our ancestors, and we really take a lot of that and try to bring that forward in both of our work. With my work, I feel that connection with our ancestors because I delve into pieces that were created that were pre-Columbian between 950 to about 1200 AD. So a lot of our ancestral pieces came from the Mesa Verde area, came from the Mimbres area, the Tularosa area, and these pieces are pre-Columbian, the black and white. One of the reasons why I started going back was because, just out of respect for what our ancestors did back then, I really admired their work, the shape, the form, the design work. There was so much put into these pieces, and a lot of these pieces you see in museums and you see in collections, and some of the designs all the designs are just done beautifully that, there's only so much museum space where people can go and visit certain pieces, but then you go into a collection and you see all these pieces that are there. And I have great respect for that, that the care and appreciation of these pieces, that I begin to study them and look at the design work and just carry on these traditions, these styles that our ancestors created.
I got my interest in pottery probably when I was fairly young. I would just look at pottery and think, it's nice to see the designs, but I think it's important to understand what the designs mean. And so growing up, I just always kind of looked at it like, wow, that's nice, that's neat, not really knowing the real significance of it. And then as I got older, it wasn't until I took more interest when I became an intern at the Oshawi Island Museum, tribal museum back home, and there was these pieces that are all the way from the 1600s, from a place called Haak'u. And so that ancestral village, there's a lot of pieces that were handpicked from communal members themselves, and they were to remain at the museum. And so looking at those pieces, I got to see, how different it was, because that was way before it evolved into these type of designs. And so there was, glaze work, and there's all these corrugated jars, and it was very interesting to see. And I would always look at it, nearly every day, and always puts a smile on my face to see, like, wow, it survived many lifetimes. It's been through a lot. And so I really wanted it piqued my interest, like maybe I can make pottery, and more so for doing it to, I guess, bring back the meaning to it, how important it is to use the pottery these days. Seeing it as it's, really nice and beautiful, but also to use it as well. So I think that's what really piqued my interest into wanting to make pottery.
I'll actually look up my older relatives' pots and try to reproduce their designs, which are all traditional designs, you know, like their typical rain clouds, which you'll see on that pot right there, or feathers and things like that. But it's hard to take older traditional designs and like make them your own, you know, because they look a certain way. Like you don't want to alter it too
Yes.
much. Like a kiva step, you know, it's the typical step, and then usually uses like a border ornamentation on the design.
Yes.
Like
There was a large piece of
yeah.
Christina's that I got to see a few years back, and it was dated 1980, no, 1930, 32. But the piece carried what I call the feather davanu, which is similar to this. You see how it has that little wing there on its head, except that it was elongated and wrapped around the pot. So I was fortunate enough to be able to sketch the design in my book, and later on was able to revive that particular design, that particular avanu. The design itself was so strong you couldn't put anything in the body. It just wrapped itself around the pot, and the designs were actually on the borders, top and bottom borders. So I noticed that when I started putting the design on, that I wasn't able to put anything in the body, which I usually do. My designs are usually how would you call them, abstract in the body. I'll do the avanu head, and then I'll do the body with abstract designs in it ending in the tail. But that particular design would not take anything in the body, so it continues to stay that way. That's the way I carried it on. So I call it Grandma's avanu.